There we go. Cool. Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to our webinar on rail freight in Wales. Nice to see a number of you joining us now. The sun is shining. I know the lure is to be sitting in your garden or going out for the day or anything but working, but thank you for taking the time to join us instead of doing that. It's a really great time, I think, to be talking about rail freight in Wales. There's so much going on at the moment, so a real opportunity to focus in on an area that we haven't really talked about in any of our events for a little bit of time. We'll get going in just a few moments, but a little bit of housekeeping from me before we start. I know some of you may have to duck out or do other things. We are recording this webinar, which means it will be up on our YouTube channel probably later today. So if you miss any part of it, please do look out for that later. You'll also be able to get to it through our website. If you want therefore to share it with colleagues, then please do, spread the word and pass that link on if people weren't able to join us today. If you want to get a copy of the slides that you see today, just drop Yvonne or myself an email and we will get those out to you after the event as well. One or two of the slides have also got some interesting links through to videos and various things that you'll be able to access as well. So if you want those slides, please do ask us and we'll get them over to you. So I think that's all I had by way of housekeeping. And so what I'm going to do is just introduce our three speakers and then we'll get started. I was just sort of reflecting actually as I was writing my intros this morning, that Wales historically had been the powerhouse, I suppose, of rail freight with coal and steel and bulk materials. But perhaps, in the last couple of decades, it's maybe stagnated a little bit, perhaps as those, heavy industries haven't been growing in the way that perhaps they once were. But I think, we're seeing a real renaissance here now with new traffic, new connections, new trials, existing customers bullish for growth, and some real, really positive stories that I'm sure we're going to hear about developments. And we're also seeing that renaissance in the railways generally in Wales for passenger and indeed the supply chain. And Simon's going to be talking to us about some aspects of that as well later on. But of course, it's not without its challenges, as we find everywhere. I think, Scottish government and even DfT now setting growth targets, perhaps a slightly different approach from Welsh government and TfW, network challenges and all the usual issues that come with trying to drive growth on an increasingly busy and crowded network. So lots to talk about today as we go forward about those opportunities and how we can really drive growth into and from Wales and help support the economy as we do. So our three speakers today, really delighted to have such a strong lineup. First up, Simon Jones, who's the CEO of the Global Centre of Railway Excellence, who's going to be talking to us about their plans for developing that facility in South Wales, where they're up to, what's happening next and why we ought to be involved. Simon Brown, who's the port manager of ABP in Wales, is going to be taking a port angle on the question, what's been happening in that port cluster, what should we look forward to. And Jess Lippitt, who's the Network Rail Senior Route Freight Manager covering Wales and Western, talking to us about what's going on more generally in rail freight in Wales, Network Rail's roles and what they've been doing. So without any further ado, let me hand over to Simon Jones to talk to us about the Global Centre of Rail Excellence. And Simon, I'm sharing your slides, aren't I? So let me get those up on screen whilst you do your introduction. Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. Afternoon, everybody. As Maggie said, I'm Simon Jones. I've met some of you before. I'm sure in a previous life. I worked for the Welsh Government for a few years before starting to do this job. Perhaps if you can just jump to the next slide, Maggie. So I'm just going to say a few words about GCRE. What I was hoping to do is just talk to you about GCRE and about what relevance it has to the rail freight industry. But just a bit about GCRE for those of you that are not aware of it. So this is an economic development project. This is a project that Welsh Government has been promoting for the last 3 or 4 years. We intend to build the UK's only purpose-built rail research and test loops and a rail demonstration site. There's a link in these slides. I won't attempt to show it now, but there's a link in the slides to a 3D model of the site. Essentially, we're going to build 2 loops of track, one about 7 kilometres round, one about 4.5 kilometres around. The larger one for testing rolling stock, the smaller one for testing rail infrastructure, and then a significant amount of sidings and storage. We have picked up over the years, and it's just been repeated back to us as we've built our business plan, that the absence of a facility like this is a real problem for innovation in the rail industry, and we think there's something here which will be useful for the industry, but from an economic development perspective will allow jobs to be created in a part of South Wales where jobs are in short supply. So for those of you not familiar with the project, this will be built at the top of the Dulles Valley, so to the northeast of Neath and Swansea, right on the edge of the Brecon Beacons National Park. What we'll be building will be unique to the UK, so there will be nowhere else in the UK that offers this combination of facilities and features. In fact, there are elements of this project which will be unique to Europe, particularly the infrastructure test loop. No one else is promoting a project like this at the moment, so we will be the only one of these in the UK. And whilst the business case, the strategic case is compelling, the commercial case is more challenging to build. So our view is once we have constructed this, there will be no other one of these built in the UK. One of our many aims with this project is for it to be the first net zero railway in the UK. So we are talking about generation of energy on site through solar. We're in discussion with a number of developers and promoters of adjacent wind farms about bringing private wires into the site, and we believe that we can run this railway on a net zero basis. GCRE Limited is the development company that we've created, which will develop and operate this thing. It's wholly owned by Welsh ministers at the moment, but we are just starting an exercise to bring in private investment. And we need that private investment in order to complete the development of the site. The ultimate aim is that Welsh ministers are have a minority interest in this facility. We will be operationally independent of any particular rail corporation or body, and we will develop and operate the facility, but in partnership with both our customers and our private sector and our public sector funders and partners. If you can just jump forward one, please, Maggie. So this is just a slide just to give some more context, really. So there are other rail test facilities available. So Network Rail have a facility in Melton in the East Midlands, which is a linear test track, not a loop. There are loop sites in Wildenrath in Germany and Velin in the Czech Republic, but all three of those are really focused on testing trains. Whilst our high-speed loop will allow us to be able to test trains and a whole load of interfaces, so signals, etc. We think that there's, we think we've got an offer here which will be really useful, particularly from the high-speed loop, because there's nothing like that in the UK. we think there's a gap in the market for high quality storage on site. So there is a storage need for the rail industry at the moment, and COVID has made that more significant. But we think there's demand there for us to be able to sell storage space to fleet owners in particular. But it also, that storage space will also allow us to stable trains which are accumulating mileage. The infrastructure loop is arguably the biggest differentiator between what we're aiming to build here and what exists elsewhere. So our model for that is that we will run a train, a heavily loaded train around that inner loop, which is about 4.5 kilometers long. We'll run a train there for 16 hours a day over a period of about 10 weeks. We'll apply 5 million tons of load to the track during that 10-week test period, and we'll run 4 of those test cycles each year. So that's 20 million tons that we'll apply to the track. 40,000 axle counts in each 10-week block. So we'll be able to really give the infrastructure a consistent and significant amount of testing in a way that just can't be done anywhere else. We're working very closely with our colleagues in Network Rail, who are planning to enter into an anchor tenancy with us, so that they can avoid the need for testing on the main line, testing new devices and systems on the main line, and that will all lead to hopefully a smoother path for validation and certification. So that's what we're aiming to achieve. If we could just jump on one more, please, Maggie. So where are we? So we've got a concept design that we've worked on over the last few years, and that concept design has allowed us to get outline planning consent to build and operate this railway 24 hours a day. We have a land option with the current landowners, Celtic Energy. We have funding offers in place in high-level terms from the Welsh Government and the UK Government. UK Government have announced it in a couple of budgets. Welsh Government announced it last March. We have a business plan that we've developed. A number of organisations have provided written support, which is part of our business plan. What we are working through at the moment is confirming that public funding. We are just in the process of letting contracts for the outline design of the railway, of the earthworks, of the master plan, and of our energy strategy. We've got various contracts in place for those elements, or we're just going through the last knockings of the standstill periods on those. We need to raise private funding for this project to match the public funding that's going to come in. We've got to turn some of those letters of support and the wider interest we've had from the industry into contracts. And then we've got to get on with construction. We're aiming to start construction of the earthworks in August of this year, and aiming to be open for business completely by the first half of 2025. Maggie, if you're able to just jump on one, please. So this slide, I think, just covers some of the ground that I've already talked about. So we submitted our business plan back end of last year. Both governments are due to make their final investment decisions in the next few weeks, which allows us to kick off the outline design, which we will bring to a conclusion. We've got a really aggressive timescale, bringing that to a conclusion in July. We start procuring construction work in the autumn. We aim to offer some warm storage capacity later this year as well. Close out our private funding, and then really get going on the main body of the construction for the railway in a year or so's time. We're going to offer some training and then full operations in spring 2025. If you could just jump on one more, please, Maggie. So we think that there are some opportunities here for the freight industry in amongst all of this lot. And I won't pretend to be an expert on these things. But if people are interested, we're very happy to facilitate conversations about this. So one of the things that we can do is validate increased axle loads on trains. So Network Rail have this 25-ton axle load limit, but that's customer practice. Our suggestion is that actually we could demonstrate what might happen if that were to increase, and demonstrate what the impacts of what that might be in a way that's just not possible anywhere else. There's a suggestion that that we could review the speed limits for freight trains, and again generate evidence that would allow standards to be able to change. We can look at the way that freight wagons are designed in order to be able to improve the services that can be offered. There's a whole load of things about fuels, a whole load of things about proving new types of devices, and various other things. And then, in terms of our business, there are opportunities in the sector. So we are going to need to bring a significant amount of material and plant onto site. So there'll be significant numbers of freight movements in and out of our site to facilitate the construction. We will be contracting with a logistics and operations partner, so somebody to not just to operate our storage facility, but somebody to be able to offer the service to our clients, to be able to haul trains under test to and from our site, the storage of trains itself, and local port access is going to be important to us as well, especially for bringing in trains from overseas for testing. So as a bit of a whistle-stop tour, the final slide, Maggie, is just my contact details if people want to get hold of me. So happy to answer questions now or pick up points with people one-to-one at some other stage, if that's helpful.
Thank you very much, Simon. That's brilliant. Really, some really interesting stuff. And I can see people starting to pop questions and comments in the chat and the Q&A box. So those of you listening in, please do keep them coming. Simon, if it's okay for you, what I'd like to do is take all the presentations and then we'll pick up all the questions at the end, if that works okay for you. So so those attending, keep them coming. Simon, thank you. Really interesting, and lots of really good points. I've already made 2 pages of notes just myself listening to you there. So it's really interesting. Right, whilst we're doing Simon Brown, I think you're up next. Simon is Associated British Ports lead for ports in South Wales. He's going to talk to us a little bit about what's been going on in the South Wales port cluster, a vision for the future, and then with a bit of I think shenanigans at the end, share a little video clip as well, which we'll make available to those of you watching through the slide pack as well. So Simon, very many thanks, and over to you.
So just double check. I can see my slides, but I can't see any of you at the moment. So just want to double check.
We can see your slides perfectly. Yeah.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you very much for inviting me today. I'm the second Simon on the agenda. My name's Simon Brown, and I'm the Divisional Port Manager for Associated British Ports in Wales and the Southwest. And what I'd like to talk to you a little bit about today is a long-term vision that ABP has put together at the back end of last year. And it's not so much around the detail of the muck and bullets of the day-to-day rail freight operation, so a little bit something different. Rail freight is very important to ABP. We've got obviously a very significant investment with a key client of ABP's in Port Talbot and Newport with Tata Steel. We've also got a significant operation in Barry through the Barry Intermodal Terminal for Dow Chemicals. And across the UK, we've got a significant rail freight footprint via the Humber, Southampton, Hams Hall, and in Ipswich as well. So coming back to this Wales vision that ABP has worked on at the back end of last year, the goal is similar to what Simon mentioned in his presentation. It's this dual opportunity of dealing with the zero carbon challenge and creating skilled jobs. There's 2 big decades are coming, and they've already started. We've got a transformation to make because the old industrial patterns and structures are in a state of flux, and everything is basically going to change as a consequence of decarbonisation and digitization. So there's a lot of transformation, innovation, decarbonisation ahead of us. We took a view as ABP in Wales and as a group that we could either take the passenger view or we can try and become one of the drivers for transformation. The passenger view is we're not really sure, we don't really like what's going on, and we don't really like to think about it either. We don't really understand the risks, and we end up with a managed decline scenario. The driver's option is understand what's coming, and understand that it's the biggest deal since we built the ports. Understand the risks, and it's not of overreaching. It's failing to see the opportunity, and we want to play a part in trying to shape the future. So we developed what we think is a big and bold vision. We put the paper together in collaboration with local partners, local councils, Welsh Government, central government, customers and suppliers. These changes are quite radical and complex. They're multi-year and they're multi-partner, and politically, some of them could be seen as being contentious. We're ambitious to make this transformation happen, but we've also got to do it whilst running the day job, which is running the 5 ports in Wales, looking after our existing portfolio and keep it in trading. So the future might surprise us. Traditional forecasting methods wouldn't have seen this move. So this is a picture of London in the 1900s, in 1900 actually. And then 13 years later, the landscape had completely changed. And these linear trends won't happen anymore in many of the industries which affect us in our ports. And also the speed of change can be surprising. Wilbur Wright, 1901, quoted, "Power of flight is at least 50 years away." 3 years later, he was up and away. This other chap here, Enrico Fermi, 1939, "I'm 90% confident that it's impossible to use uranium to sustain a fission chain reaction." And he should know. But then 3 years later, this is him with his first prototype working. So we produced a vision document. We hope it's seen as a sort of clear and fresh vision. It's not just the ABP vision. We want to have a collective and collegiate approach to it. I'm happy to share the links with you on this document. At its heart, there's a very simple map. And the video that I'll show in a couple of minutes will talk you through how we built the vision and the ambition we've got to bring it. But basically, if you look at this map, if you start on the bottom right-hand corner, you've got this Industrial Revolution loop here. And you can see the coming disruption around the carbon challenge and the digitization. This requires us to create new ways of thinking and new pathways. And we've developed these 4 missions, as we call it. So if I may, let me show you the video now. But before I do, just bear one thing in mind. These 4 missions, they are compelling on their own, but when they're linked together, then this is the real value that we can generate in Wales, because there's connectivity between decarbonising energy, decarbonising the manufacturing processes, supply chain and logistics, as well as creating these growth environments. So I'll finish off by showing you the video. And if you remember nothing else from today, it's all about dealing with this zero carbon challenge and creating skilled jobs and careers in Wales. Maggie, if you could show the vid.
Thank you very much. Simon, do you want to just drop your screen share and then I'll do mine? Thank you.
At ABP, we've been sketching out how our ports in Swansea, Port Talbot, Barry, Cardiff and Newport can help Wales adapt and prosper in a rapidly changing world. This part of Wales has seen cutting-edge technological innovation before and can again as we address the big issues of decarbonisation and digitisation. The Welsh economy is going to change radically in coming decades, and the challenge for all of us is to create new growth pathways in a zero-carbon world. Here, we show how ports deliver Wales's coming transformation. If a shift this big is going to happen, we need a really clear set of objectives. So we've created 4 bold missions, which aim to focus our efforts and build partnership working. These missions are also intended to create positive feedback loops, which see one mission reinforce the success of the next. Our first mission addresses the coming revolution in the way that energy is generated, distributed and used. We see South Wales's ports making a major contribution to delivering the changes that Wales needs. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of new floating offshore wind turbines will be needed, and this will spin out an entirely new construction, maintenance and supply chain industry for Wales. On-port wind generation, solar and especially tidal lagoon energy generation opportunities can also make a big contribution. This is a decarbonisation game changer for Wales. But it's not only that. It helps trigger a cycle of growth in our second mission, helping Wales develop its manufacturing industries in a decarbonising world. Ports have a key role, helping capture carbon dioxide from manufacturers, transfer it onto tanker vessels and transport it to carbon sequestration points. Likewise, ports can help get large-scale hydrogen supplies to industrial users. We will help create new carbon capture and hydrogen handling facilities for our anchor tenants. But the real step change comes when other users plug into the new systems. Wales's ports become integrated, zero-emission industrial hubs, attracting new investment and new jobs. That's the positive feedback loop working for everyone. Decarbonised logistics play into this feedback loop too. We see the emergence of zero-carbon freight villages on our ports, driven by our ability to supply the energy that will decarbonise the delivery process. The port's proximity to labour and end customers is a critical advantage too. Again, that feeds the positive feedback loop, accelerating the economic transformation. We know that as the world changes, our ports will need to adapt. We'll work carefully with our stakeholders to look at whether the time is right to provide new living, working and environmental opportunities at some locations. These are big, exciting ambitions, but we know that ABP can't make these changes alone. To get the scale of change we all need, we'll be working with our partners to create a shared vision. and build a task force to deliver the missions we develop together. We'll need to ensure that we continuously improve and make sure we share risks, rewards and intelligence. Standing back, this is a port-led transformation with huge implications across Wales and the UK. There's a tremendous prize for success. We'll see a burst of innovation, a dramatically reduced carbon footprint, and thousands of great jobs for future Wales.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Simon. That's certainly an ambitious strategy there, and it'll be interesting, I think, in the questions to think about, how rail freight can play a part in that, in construction and in that zero carbon logistics, of course. So lots to think about there, and thank you very much. Okay, so our final speaker before we turn to questions and discussion is Jess Lippitt from Network Rail. Jess is one of the senior route freight managers there covering Wales and the West, and is going to talk to us about what's been going on. Jess, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. So just checking everyone can see my screen there.
You can, you just want to pop it onto slideshow probably.
Perfect, there we go.
That's it, lovely, thank you.
Great stuff. So I'm going to buck the trend, and unfortunately my name isn't Simon. I'm Jess Lippitt. So as Maggie's mentioned, I'm the senior route freight manager looking after Western and Wales within Network Rail. So primarily my role is really to be championing the voice of our freight end users and our freight customers within Network Rail, making sure that we're looking at any sort of business growth opportunities, addressing any challenges really, and making sure that we're working collaboratively with our freight customers to drive business growth forward. So firstly, I just wanted to give a bit of an overview of where we are in terms of volumes in the commodities with the freight on Western and Wales. Unfortunately, this graph here does cover both Western and Wales rather than just the Wales region, the Welsh route. It's pretty reflective actually of the trends that we're seeing across Wales too. So a real uplift now, especially as you can see across the big three commodities that we see on the route in terms of aggregates, petroleum and steel. And I think it's a really promising sign that we are starting to now see volumes actually topping pre-COVID levels. And rather unsurprisingly, especially with the first lockdowns across year 2021, year 2020 into 2021, we saw a real decline across some of the commodities as reflected in the chart in front of us. But what is a real positive step now is especially with steel and the construction industry, we are starting to see these hit pre-COVID levels and top them as well. Parcel in particular, we know we saw their traffic decline throughout the first initial lockdown. Whilst I understand some of their tinplate traffic into Trostra, we're seeing a bit of a boom. Some of the automotive traffic, which is some of the jewel of their crown, really started to take a hit. Whereas now we are starting to see this starting to pick back up again. We are seeing some strong campaign traffic. We've seen strong volumes going into the likes of Newport Docks. We've also seen some campaign traffic in a new flow into a couple of weeks ago. There was a campaign into Portbury Docks, around 10 trains a week for a 4-week period, which is again some really positive news there. So we're starting to see the resurgence of some new flows and new traffic into the in the region. Again, just giving a bit of a focus onto the aggregate traffic. One of, as I said, steel is obviously the real big player, unsurprisingly, in rail freight in Wales. But we are starting to see a real growth in the aggregate traffic in particular, especially in terms of Mac and Quarry, which has recently come back online for rail volumes over the last few months. And I just wanted to give a bit of a show here in terms of what we are doing as Network Rail to support these kind of projects and schemes. So as I said, Mac and Quarry, it's one of the sites that's owned by Hanson. They're really keen to start growing their freight volumes out of the site, and we really wanted to support this. There was previously a landslide on the line, and whereby a temporary fix was made to allow the traffic to run. However, it was only a temporary fix. We wanted to get on top of it and allow the traffic to run as quickly as possible. Whereas, as we've noted here, there was a 5-day block required on the line for full rectification for a permanent fix to be made. Unfortunately, this would have meant that no traffic was able to run out of the site for the duration of the blockade. We had a really good collaboration with Hanson and Frieght, who were the freight operator hauling the traffic at the time, to see what we could do to make this a bit of a turn it around from a negative into a real positive. What we agreed with the customers was that with a slight extension of the block, we were actually able to deliver our A10 capability, which is now seen since this delivery has taken place. There's an increase in tonnage conveyed per every train that is now coming out of the site, which has allowed us to support our freight customers' ambitions for growth out of the quarry. Just to give a bit of an overview as well, I'll just give a quick brief overview of FDM for those that aren't aware of what it means. But essentially, FDM is the freight delivery metric, and it's how we measure Network Rail performance onto freight traffic nationally, but obviously we've broken it down to a route level here. For me, it's a real key performance focus that we look at Network Rail performance issues onto freight into the on the route. But essentially, if we want to be attracting modal shift and freight growth, it's got to be seen to be a reliable and robust form of transport and method. So one thing that we're looking at is, as I said, freight delivery metric, which in a nutshell basically looks at services that have arrived 15 minutes or later into their end destination, with network rail being a network issue, being cited as the root cause of the delay. As you can see through this chart, unfortunately, we've had a really difficult year in terms of FDM delivery. When we've done a bit of a deep dive into it over the past 12 months, we rather unsurprisingly, as I think everyone's seen over the last few weeks especially, that severe weather has really had a huge impact onto the route performance and the network as a whole, but especially on the Wales route. So I think most importantly, what are we doing about it? As I said, we really want to be making sure that the network and rail freight is a reliable and robust method of transport to our existing customers and also to any new customers to encourage modal shift. So you may have seen on the news that we're undertaking the 7 Estuary Resilience Programme, which is an investment of £25 million into the reliability and the resilience of the corridor up the Severn Estuary. This essentially is going to consist of removing 30,000 tonnes worth of material from the cliff face and also installation of a mesh and bolt system along the cliff face as well. I have included a link there which gives a bit of an overview of the work and a bit more of the detail, but essentially this project will, it will remove the need for sort of emergency speed restrictions, landslides, a whole host of things that we see impacting freight performance and allow a bit more reliability and resilience into the corridor. The other area of work that we're looking at is what we call FDM deep dives. So we've done a bit of a review over the last 8 periods, and doing a bit of trend analysis. Let's really get to the bottom of what are causing these repeat failures on the network. And some of the focus areas that we're looking at is TSR removal, temporary speed restriction removal, trespass issues, flooding mitigations, and track faults. And what we're doing is working with our colleagues in the route to produce some robust action plans to try and tackle these areas, again, to make it a really reliable form of transport for existing and new customers. So just touching on North Wales very briefly, rather unsurprisingly, I think most people on the call will know that South Wales is really seen as the hub of freight when it comes to Wales as a whole. We do see a bit of traffic dotted throughout the area, but really we see, especially with Tata being located in South Wales, it really is where the hub of freight is at the moment. But some really good news stories that we've just had a bit of a renaissance of freight in North Wales, shall we call it, in terms of a few sites that have come online or are due to be coming online imminently. So you may have seen in the press that the Prime Minister recently undertook a visit to Penmaen Mawr, which is the Hanson quarry up in North Wales. That one came online just before Christmas. Again, a lot of work went into investment into the site by Hanson, but also from the Network Rail side of the boundary to make sure that the connecting infrastructure was in the order that it needed to be in to support the traffic. We're already seeing a number of trains going over to Tuebrook. So a really positive story there that terminal is coming back online successfully. Over the next few months, we are hoping to see Llandudno Junction. Now, this is a really good project. This is a real collaborative effort between Network Rail, our freight property teams, Frieght, and also the Welsh Government, who were supported with the Freight Facilities Grant in terms of bringing this traffic online. Hot off the press that the connection was actually sorted in terms of the points this weekend. So we're hoping to see trains due out of the site within the next few weeks. Again, this is Welsh slate planings that are coming out of the site. So some really good news there. Also, we're working with CEMEX in providing sidings at Rill to support movement of aggregate out of their quarry from Rains. So the aggregate at Rains they couldn't get it out the door quick enough, and it was almost getting to the point of being full to the brim. So we've worked closely with CEMEX, also our counterparts with Frieght Property and our SCO colleagues to make a shared usage of the sidings at Rill to allow the movement and loading of material at Rill to provide onward movement to sidings into provide onward movement into England of this aggregate. So again, we're hoping to see some traffic coming online there in the next few weeks. So as I said, a real pickup, especially in aggregate traffic in the North Wales area. So just looking to the future then, you may have seen in the press that we've recently undertaken a trial of timber from Hackney sidings in Newton Abbot to Abergavenny. We're working closely with Colas there to understand what works need to be done in Abergavenny to allow this trial to become a more permanent fixture. Something else that I think we might need to take into account with more recent events is the impact of the Ukraine conflict. Obviously, as I've already mentioned, that petroleum is one of the key commodities that is moved on the route at the moment. And what will the impact of the Ukraine conflict have on that and the Russian fuel crisis? Will we likely to see a resurgence of the coal market? How will that impact? You know, I doubt for any moment it's going to get back to what it was, you know, circa 20 years ago. I think it's one that we need to sort of keep a bit of a watching eye on a bit of a focus on. Again, the possibility of electric arc furnaces in the steel making process. How will this change the profile of rail freight in Wales? Will we see an influx of scrap traffic in order to support any construction of any electric arc furnaces? Again, supporting intermodal traffic. We are working closely with the route on progressing W10 capability into South Wales. There is a funding decision due imminently, as I understand it, with regards to W12. And we want to be making sure that we drive this forward to be supporting intermodal traffic in and out of Wales. I've included a site here, which is, you can see a map in the bottom right-hand corner, which is a site called Tracoon over in Fishguard. So this is an old MOD facility. I think it was last taking traffic in around 1994. Again, it's a huge site, it's around 1,100 acres. And we're working closely with the developers of the site to see what possibilities they have in terms of this area. Could it be used for sort of rolling stock storage, hydrogen generation? Again, really working with some of these potential sites that we could be looking to bring online and what we can do to support. And also looking at as well express freight and light freight logistics. We have one of my colleagues is sort of our specialist in this area, and I know that Cardiff Central was looked at as part of the capability study for a number of sites, a number of the stations across the UK, in terms of understanding what could be done to allow an express freight or light logistics sort of setup. Again, you know, with the sort of areas of what we say is stereotypically heavy freight, we're highly unlikely to see a brand new steel terminal open, a brand new super quarry anywhere really. What can we do to start helping support these express freight and light logistics and really starting to drive this forward? So thank you very much. That was a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the areas that we're looking at, and hopefully gives a bit of an overview of things that we're doing.
Thank you very much, Jess. That was great, and I've written a little list of things that I thought I might know about, and you've put another 10 on the list there, so well done.
No worries.
I think do you want to just drop your share screen if you can, that would be great.
Bear with me, I'm used to Teams. I'm ever so sorry, Maggie, bear with me.
At the top somewhere, stop share somewhere, might be in red.
Full share, there we go, got it.
Yeah, brilliant, perfect. Now we can all see you all, that's perfect, thank you. So much going on, and you know, I think as ever when we put these webinars together, we've got 3 people, and I can already see all sorts of different interactions and connections and things that are coming up. So I think, you know, that's really exciting, just to even just sort of understand that potential and what we've got. So I have a number of questions and comments in the chat. So I'm, rather than ask questions of my own at first, which is my general habit, I'm going to go straight to those because I know we've got quite a few in there. So 2 questions here, I think, Simon Jones, for you, which, sorry, get me rid of that, are really about how, well, one of them's asking about requirements for facility train control systems, and one is about depot maintenance equipment and shunters, but really how should the supply chain start to get involved, where they've got, you know, innovative ideas, or equipment and services that might be of interest to you as you build a site over? What's the process for that involvement?
Yes, thanks, Maggie. I think in the first instance, just people get hold of me directly. So my email was on the bottom of the thing there. I mean, we will need to acquire all of those things. Machinery to allow us to be able to operate the depot, train control system for the site. But I suppose we're also a demonstrator for the whole railway industry. So part of our proposition is we'd like to get into conversations with potential partners who want to be able to have somewhere to either continue to develop their products or to be able to showcase them to clients from around the world. And they'll be able to do that in a way that's off the main line. So it'll be a different safety case that we have. It will be a different way of operation to the mainline railway because we're a large laboratory whose purpose is to allow people to test and develop products, to allow people to bring products through the technology readiness levels to be able to take them out into the outside world. So I suppose I'd flip that point around to ask people how they might like to make use of our facility.
And just on that, Simon, obviously, if you are, a massive multinational train builder, then you've kind of got one set of commercials. If you're an SME with a small product that that might well benefit from some testing, will you be offering kind of a range of different ways to get involved in that?
Yes, we will. So that pricing model is something that we haven't nailed down yet. So I think there are some pricing models which are easy for us to talk about. So storage of rolling stock, there's a well-established pricing model for that. Testing of rolling stock, actually, there's quite a well-established price book for that. When it comes to more complex activities like testing of infrastructure or demonstrating products and letting them run for longer periods of time, I guess we've got more options available to us because, as I say, we will be unique in this respect. So I think we'd be interested in talking to people about that. We absolutely recognise that not every organisation is going to be able to afford to put the money in up front for testing, particularly an SME or a startup who's got a particular product. So we're interested in having some conversations with people about how we can support them and work together on those kinds of things.
Lovely. And just on that, I mean, Simon Brown, you set out a very far-reaching and innovative plan there for the ports, and I could already see some synergies around, Simon J's ambitions for, a net zero facility and the developments that you're planning around green hydrogen, carbon capture and storage. Appreciate it's very early days in both cases, but is there a synergy here, do we think? Is there some, tie up that's beneficial?
I think potentially, yes. I mean, we've been talking to each other around the first easy part, which is how could you get rolling stock into Wales and then up to the facility. Yeah. We brought in rolling stock before through to Newport. I think the more interesting transformational it could be around somewhere closer to the testing facility as opposed to Newport, and then it's about timing. Yeah. I think some of the ambition that we've got for floating offshore wind and hydrogen, carbon capture and sequestration, it's about getting that sequencing right with what Simon's ambitions are to get up and running by 2025, I think. Yeah. But yeah.
Okay, cool. There's a couple of comments in the chat, so let me read them out. I think, Jess, mostly for you. Good to see Llandudno Junction site coming forward, which is an early opportunity from Taith Regional Transport Plan. That's from Michael Whittaker. I was very pleased to see that as well, because my brother works for Breedon, so I'll be able to ring him up and tell him something he might not know himself, which will get me some brownie points later on. But also people pleased about the timber and hoping that trial becomes permanent. But in terms of the questions, Jess, one for you. Does Abe, or indeed Simon, concerns about the Burns Commission report for South East Wales rather light on freight, and I know some concerns about what that would mean for the South Wales mainline and gauge cleared traffic and sort of access to and from the sites. Jess, are you involved with that?
Okay, so I actually spoke at length yesterday with the project lead from Network Rail's side of things around the necessary involvement for freight to have any potential impact. I know that Arup are being instructed within the next few weeks by TfW to start drawing some schemes together for this. And I've already contacted them actually at the end of last week to say that there needs to be some freight workshops held. We need to be making sure that freight right at the start of this, I don't want them contacted as almost an afterthought. It needs to be real involvement from the get-go. So that is something that really close, but we're making sure that we stick really close to. And as I said, that freight are involved from the get-go rather than a sort of presentation after all, this is what we're thinking. We need to be involved in the initial conversations, and I'm making sure that I'm there to facilitate that.
Yeah, great. And I see Burns is now commissioned to look at the North Wales main line as well. You know, is that a similar process for you in terms of getting the involvement in that study even earlier?
I'd like to think so, Maggie. I think that the earlier that we can get freight involved in these sort of things and these kind of conversations, it is pivotal, rather than making sure that, as I said, going back to it being an afterthought, you know, there might be things from the freight community that we can bring into these sort of reports and put forward as ideas and thoughts and suggestions that hadn't necessarily been considered in the first instance. So for me, early engagement is key. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, you know, if you just reflect on, you know, those flows of traffic that you've put up today on the North Wales corridor, that, you know, we all knew there was latent demand, but actually it's really beginning to realise itself now. You know, it's really timely to make that case, because, you know, those are great jobs and skills, and, you know, export investment for Wales as well.
Absolutely. And I think, as you said, it's funny because some of these projects I knew sort of even before my time they were first mentioned in terms of, and they're actually we're able to get these over the finish line now, and it's really exciting. And I think a sign of the times that so many of these in a sort of geography that was stereotypically fairly quiet for freight are all coming across the finish line at a relatively similar time. Yeah. So anything we could do to champion these and make sure that they're stable going forward is really important.
And I'm gonna ask you a question now. Well, in fact, we've got one from Julian. Let me ask this and then I'm going to build on that. But question for Simon B. How do ABP feel about using port rail infrastructure for non-shipment traffic, e.g. using the intermodal terminal in Cardiff docks for domestic consumer goods business? And linked to that, my question would be, I think, how do we, you know, grow intermodal in Wales as well now, you know, because I know we've got some really solid developments at Wentlug with Tesco's trialling their electric lorries out from there now, but we've also got the gauge clearance on the western almost there, or, you know, there or thereabouts, and you know, it seems to me a bit of an opportunity there. So how do we get that moving together? So two parts really, one for you, Simon, about non-shipment traffic, and perhaps more generally on intermodal.
So we're open to all ideas, and particularly if it makes the sort of the pie bigger and is good for Wales. I mean, we are, you know, we're a private company that is driven by contributing to our shareholders. The second point I would say is around getting, you know, public passenger trains through busy working docks. There's a specific challenge around safety. We've got to make sure that, you know, we can actually do that type of thing. But we're you know, I think we've got a city port in Cardiff, and, you know, CA1 is coming, you know, Cardiff, you know, inner city is coming towards the port in a successful way so far. I mean, if you look at the port map 10, 20, 50 years ago, then we had, you know, the port extended right into Cardiff Bay now, and the transformation that's happened there. So if you look at it in terms of a long-term play, then there's a trend line that we can continue. Practically, how you get passenger integrated with busy port operation, I think that's probably a bit more of a challenge.
And on intermodal rail freight opportunities there?
Yeah, I mean, it's all driven by the customer, you know. So where's the end customer, and what do they want, and does it stack up? But the more cargo we can get, you know, moving on rail, the better. basically. I mean, we're well positioned to do that. There are some industries, though, that we haven't been able to crack the code, vis-a-vis competitive ports in the south, for example, because it's the ocean freight driving the size of the vessels that will go into, say, a southern port. That means that the rail won't, it's not coming in via Wales, for example, right? So it's not just the port; it's about how to link it with the end-to-end intermodal, if that makes sense.
Jess, anything from you on in terms of gauging intermodal?
No, I think obviously we're working on W10 at the moment. I think one of the challenges we're having as well is some of the operational restrictions in terms of that, and we're really trying to challenge those to make it feasible. We don't want to say, yep, you've got W10, but you're going to have this whole load of restrictions to boot with it because it's just not feasible. So that's one of the things we're really looking to work forward. And I think as well is, I know one of the notice on the comments as well in the chat around sort of availability of terminals as well. And, making sure that they're not just sort of all focused in one area, and how we're working with business development opportunities to try and drive these forward.
Yeah, that's absolutely key. Absolutely. Okay, I've got a couple of, one quick one and one naughty one left in the questions, and a couple of minutes to go, so that's well timed. Simon, I think you answered this, but during the construction phase of GCRE, what are the opportunities for bringing materials in by rail? I think you touched on that in your slides.
Yeah, I think that question came in just before that slide went out. I mean, we've got a huge amount of material we've got to bring in. There's something like 30 kilometers of track and ballast and sleepers to bring in. So, the rail, frankly, is going to be the best answer for us. We've got, we picked the site because it's on a branch line. So, I think that's that is the obvious answer for us, is to bring construction materials in by rail.
Great, cool. So watch this space, people. Yeah, and then finally, I'm just going to read this one like it is, and I don't know whether anyone's got any thoughts or not, but feel free not to, or do have. With GBR's commitment to bring forward a duty to promote rail freight, so Great British Railways that is, and the development of rail freight growth targets by Whitehall government, any views on how best this will be achieved in Wales? And then the point about terminals. Anyone want to tackle the macro politics?
I think for me, a lot of it is we're going to have to start thinking smart. Like a lot, as I've said already, we're highly unlikely to see a new super quarry. We're highly unlikely to see a new whopping great big steelworks. What can we do in terms of making rail freight more attractive and accessible? I think for me, accessibility is key. Unless you work in the industry, it's almost a little bit of a dark art. And I think sometimes that could be seen to be putting off some of this almost new to rail business. And I think we maybe need to sort of demystify it a little bit in terms of making it a more attractive and reliable mode of transport to some of those that aren't really necessarily au fait with rail, and make them confident in feeling they can come and speak to us about it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, also trying to put people together to build up whole train loads in a market where a lot of the big train loads are already on rail, frankly. We need to start looking at some of the smaller ones. There's a huge role, I think, for the ports in that as well, and getting their customers together to organise the train loads. Brilliant. Okay, folks, we are right on time, so I am going to draw proceedings to a close. But a really, really interesting session. Simon Jones, fascinating to hear about, what's going on at GCRE and the opportunities that are there. And people are on the call today. You've got Simon's email. Do get in touch, whether that is in terms of that construction, the opportunity to use the facility, or if you just want more information. Simon and Jess, thank you so much for your thoughts as well around market development, what's going on in rail freight and what the opportunities are. Thank you all of you for listening in today and for your questions and comments in the chat. Do get in touch if you want the slides. Do look out for the recording on YouTube. If you want to come we've always got some more webinars lined up. Do keep an eye on our website. We've got our Scottish conference in a few weeks' time, and then our May meeting up in Greater Manchester. So if you want a tour of the regions, we're putting that on for you. I think we've even got a webinar on the West Midlands in May as well. So plenty of events coming up. And if you want any more information on any of the things you've heard today, or indeed any of our events, just get in touch with Yvonne or myself and we'll get that over. But meantime, thank you all very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.